Irredentism is the political concept of unifying all of a particular nation's previous territories based on past ownership or claims, almost always rooted in some kind of close ethnic, linguistic, religious, or cultural ties, although sometimes this can certainly get a bit out of hand when considering just what a modern nation's historical territorial boundaries were. So really, this is somewhere between nationalism and imperialism. This has led to a number of wars, conflicts, political movements, and referendums for the liberation, or in some cases, involuntary occupation of a given territory, and almost every country in the world has at some point in its history or in the present day had ambitions for national expansion, and let's just say that some were really good at it, as at one point in time, the five nations of Russia, France, Spain, Portugal, and England had combined territorial possessions covering nearly the entirety of the Earth's surface. So what would it look like if we took this concept to the extreme and looked at every country on Earth in terms of their current claimed and incorporated territories versus the maximum extent of their claimed or historically occupied land? As mentioned, pretty much every nation on Earth has had some sort of expansionist claims or ambitions in the past, so in today's video we'll be looking at a rather random and select bunch of irredentist scenarios that I find interesting, and you can give me your feedback on which other areas you'd like to see covered. Keep in mind, this is not necessarily the same as covering what a country looked like at the height of its power, because some, in fact the majority, of irredentist dreams remained as fantasies, often being used as tool for propaganda or other means. So although nearly all of the countries in the Americas have had irredentist claims in their history since independence, the bulk of these were not based off of ethnic or linguistic affinities, with a couple exceptions, such as the American annexation of Texas based off their shared Anglo-Protestant heritage, or the ambitions of the nation of Haiti, which probably distinguishes itself as the most ethnically and racially distinct country in all of the Americas. Haiti is, of course, the western third of the island of Hispaniola, a former French territory established after a war with Spain, after which France began to import huge numbers of African slaves, of whom by the beginning of the 19th century outnumbered the French masters on the island 50-1. Clearly not a great idea, as the Haitians eventually fought for their freedom, massacring the French population of the island and eventually gaining independence, albeit with heavy casualties, and this was seen as a massive victory in terms of black identitarianism in the Americas, and Haiti saw itself as, and was seen by many, as the revolutionary voice for the enslaved African-descended population, and this inspired a multitude of other slave rebellions across the Caribbean. The war with the French, however, had left Haiti extremely deprived in terms of manpower and resources, and Haiti had laid claim to the entire island of Hispaniola, and following the independence of the Dominican Republic from Spain, Haiti, whose population vastly dwarfed that in the DR, annexed the region in a move that had been described as an invasion or invitation by some. It's rather confusing, but the Haitians claim to be acting in the best interest of the area, where they abolished slavery and gave Dominican citizens, of whom the majority were mulattoes, special privileges within the new countries, and for over 20 years the unified island held itself together as the only majority African-descended country in the Americas. However, highly unpopular decisions such as the disenfranchisement of white Dominicans and a high tax rate imposed by the Haitian army led to the Dominicans expelling the Haitians and declaring themselves independent once more in the mid-19th century, and this has had massive ramifications on the relations of the two countries to this day. But what if the so-called Haitian Empire had never collapsed? Although the maximum claim of Haiti was the island of Hispaniola, the Haitian irredentist dream was to unite all of the African-descended peoples of the Americas, despite belonging to separate colonial powers, speaking different languages, practicing different religions, and even descending from different groups in Africa. Therefore, had things gone a bit differently, the maximum extent of an imperialist Haiti could extend far beyond its current borders to include areas around the Caribbean with a majority African-descended population, such as the bulk of the Lesser Antilles, parts of Cuba and Puerto Rico, as well as most of the coastline of Central America. Is this realistic? Absolutely not. But these are just the dreams of an ambitious nation we're talking about. Moving on across the pond, I could go down the route that everyone is most familiar with, that being German expansionism during World War II, attempting to create a pan-Eurasian empire stretching all the way to Siberia, or the Italians during the same time, who attempted to create a neo-Roman empire spanning the Mediterranean. But I've already covered both of these in the past, and they've been discussed extensively, so instead let's look at one of the unsung martyrs of European history, the Poles, meaning the Polish people. So Poland today may seem like a fairly unassuming, milquetoast nation, but in the past, some of the deadliest conflicts in all of human history took place here, as in World War I, 10% of Poland's population died, and World War II, nearly a third. And in fact, it wasn't until 1980 that Poland's population recovered to what it was in 1940, and many see the creation of the modern nation of Poland as nearly a footnote in European history, not very important compared to the big dogs that surrounded them. So it would come as a surprise to many that not too long ago, the Eastern European landscape was dominated by the Poles, even before the rise of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and due to this, Poles inhabited lands further east. In fact, up until the Second World War, Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania, was majority Polish, and in fact, even today, those of Polish ancestry still make up a majority in the surrounding district, and also make up a rather large proportion of the northwest corner of Belarus near this region, and although they officially only make up 3% of the Belarusian population, this is almost certainly an undercount. Similarly, in Ukraine, ethnic Poles make up a small portion of the population on the census, but likely number many times more in the Galicia region. After World War II, virtually the entire nation of Poland was shifted west, with the German-inhabited regions of Silesia, Pomerania, and parts of Prussia transforming into the new northwest frontier of the Polish nation, with Polish settlers from all over the country migrating to these new territories, transforming entire cities in only a matter of months. Although the proposal of annexing the remaining Polish majority regions in Lithuania, Belarus, and Ukraine aren't really taken all that seriously in Poland today, and Irredentist Poland would include these areas, honestly not changing the population too terribly much, but by taking this to an absurd degree, Poland could have stretched much farther east. The Koreans are a people who have similarly been downtrodden and trampled by the surrounding regional superpowers of China and Japan, being a tributary of the Qing dynasty for nearly 300 years and later being a territory of Japan for another half-century, which they certainly did not enjoy. But there were also many different Korean empires that united the peninsula and beyond, the most prominent and one of the oldest being the Goguryeo Kingdom, which lasted from the beginning of the first millennia to 700 AD, and ruled over most of modern South Korea, North Korea, and parts of northeast China and the Russian Far East. And their language, although not intelligible with modern Korean, was certainly a descendant of the Koreanic family. However, one of the most interesting Korean kingdoms to me is Balhae, which consisted of most of the former Goguryeo territory, albeit stretching further into Siberia, including the bulk of Primorsky Krai in Russia. Balhae was made up of different ethnicities, including the Koreans, Manchu, Siberians, and other native Tungusic peoples, although this would later be overshadowed by the kingdoms of Goryeo and later Joseon, which would evolve into the area that we now know today as Korea. Ethnic Koreans today make up a majority not only in North and South Korea, but also in the neighboring Chinese territory of the Yanbian Korean Autonomous Prefecture, which I dubbed as the Lost Third Korea nobody talked about in an older video, which some people disagreed with, but at the same time it seems rather odd to me that people discuss the reunification of Korea endlessly, but no one seems to discuss this community of more than 1 million Koreans in northeast China who make up a solid majority near the North Korean border. So in reality, a united Korea would encompass all of this Korean inhabited land as well, although short of a Third World War, it seems highly improbable the PRC would ever release this territory, even though the greatest extent of Korean irredentist claims would span far beyond this, extending into Vladivostok, Sakhalin, and the rest of Primorsky Krai in Russia. Lastly, let's look at a situation that a lot of people have been asking me to discuss for a really long time now. That would be the area known as Greater Somalia, all the areas inhabited by ethnic Somalis who are divided between many different tribes, clans, and dialects to this day, although they're all united under the single common ethnonym. You see, Somalia was not always the pirate-infested, anarchist no man's land that is portrayed in Hollywood, as only a generation ago, Somalia was actually one of the wealthiest and most militarily proficient countries in Africa, a strong Soviet ally, and hence enjoyed many of the perks of Soviet military technology, and was actually extremely socially progressive for its time. However, before this, Somalia had a long history of war with Ethiopia, with the main gripe being the division of the Somali homeland, with Ethiopia controlling a large chunk of the Somali nation known as Ogaden. During the Italian occupation of the Horn of Africa, which the Somalis have mixed feelings towards, the Ogaden region was united with Somalia under the same administrative division, but after the area split once again into the states of Ethiopia and Somalia, many Somali nationalists were quite upset about the exclusion of quite a large proportion of their ethnic kin, with a large division being located in neighboring Kenya and French-controlled Djibouti as well, which would cause massive conflicts in the region, the most noteworthy being the Ogaden War, which they almost won actually, but after which the Somali government would basically descend into rebellion and civil war, resulting in the situation we see today. Ever since, Somali nationalism based on racial, cultural, and religious separatism has been widespread in Ethiopia, Djibouti, and neighboring Kenya, with a number of insurgency groups committing some quite atrocious acts of terrorism in the latter country, showing the darker side of irredentist goals. However, some other Somali nationalist groups are of course 100% peaceful, engaging in more democratic means, although it's unlikely they'll ever reach their goal anytime soon considering recent events. So in conclusion, I did try to cover some diverse regions, although there's 200 more countries that couldn't be covered due to time restraints. Some of the more interesting being Armenia, Ukraine, Thailand, Mongolia, Greece, Ireland, or a whole host of others. So for today's poll, let me know which region of the world you'd like to see more historical irredentist analysis on. Also, So for today's poll, let me know which region of the world you'd like to see more historical irredentist analysis on. Also, due to popular request, I'm going to be releasing all of my homemade maps that I create for each individual video in a bundle known as the Masamaps on my subreddit, which will be linked in the description of every video starting here on out. It'd be a shame for such work to not be in the hands of the public, so please let me know your thoughts on the interesting irredentist scenarios featured in today's video. And as always, thank you all for watching. This has been Mason, and I'll see you next time.